Before we go any further, if you care about serious history, hard-earned survival knowledge, and lessons that actually matter beyond entertainment, subscribe to this channel and share it with someone who values real-world preparedness. What we're covering today isn't nostalgia, and it isn't trivia. It's living history you can still grow, harvest, and rely on. During the Second World War, food shortages weren't theoretical. Across Europe, Asia, and even parts of North America, civilians survived because they remembered plants their grandparents once relied on. These were not exotic jungle finds or fantasy survival tricks. They were ordinary plants, often dismissed today as weeds, that quietly kept people alive. Many of those same plants are still thriving right now, overlooked in modern gardens, road edges, and abandoned fields. Understanding them is not just an academic exercise, it's a blueprint for long-term resilience. When supply chains collapse, they do not collapse politely. We taught a brutal lesson. Calories, micronutrients and storage mattered more than recipes. Governments issued ration cards, victory garden pamphlets and foraging manuals because people had to become producers again. These plants mattered because they required little care, survived poor soils, and returned year after year. For a modern survivalist or historian, their value lies in permanence. Once established, they reduce dependence on external inputs. That is why, honestly, studying them now is smarter than scrambling later. Dandelion was a calorie and vitamin workhorse disguised as a weed. Dandelion was consumed across occupied Europe when cultivated crops failed. The leaves provided vitamin A and C when scurvy and night blindness were real threats. The roots were roasted as a coffee substitute when imports vanished. The flowers were fermented into simple wines that boosted morale as much as calories. Today, the same plant grows aggressively in lawns and compacted soil. To apply this knowledge practically, just stop treating it as an enemy. Allow a patch to grow intentionally. Harvest young leaves in early spring for greens, dig roots in fall for drying, and dry flowers for later use. This is not romantic survivalism. It is nutritional redundancy. Jerusalem artichoke, sometimes called sunchoke, became a critical famine food in parts of Europe during the Second World War because, well, it survives cold, neglect, and even poor soil. Unlike potatoes, it resists blight and frost, which made it, pretty invaluable. Its tubers are rich in inulin, a carbohydrate that could sustain energy even when bread disappeared from the table. The Germans cultivated it heavily when conventional crops collapsed. In modern application, this plant really belongs on the edge of any survival garden. You just plant the tubers once, harvest selectively, and leave some in the ground. It will return year after year without irrigation or fertilizer, creating, honestly, a self-renewing calorie reserve. Stinging nettle was collected widely during the war, especially in Britain and Eastern Europe. Once cooked or dried, the sting disappears, leaving a plant that's actually higher in iron and calcium than most cultivated greens. Nettle soups were, common wartime meals. Fibres from the stalks were even processed into cloth when cotton was unavailable. For modern use, it's a good idea to allow nettles to grow in a controlled corner of your land. Harvest with gloves, especially in the early growth stages. You can dry the leaves for winter soups or, grind them into powder to enrich stored foods. This plant, honestly, bridges food and medicine in a way that very few others do. Lamb's quarters, well, they replaced spinach when gardens failed. Lamb's quarters thrived in bombed cities and abandoned fields. It grows faster than spinach and really tolerates disturbance quite well. WWII-era civilians relied on it heavily because it required no cultivation and produced seeds for future seasons. Today it appears wherever soil is turned. Instead of pulling it, why not harvest it young? You can steam it just like spinach, save the seeds in late summer and scatter them where you want future harvests. This, in fact, is how civilians quietly rebuilt food security under occupation. Chicory root coffee became a staple across wartime Europe. The roasted root offered bitterness, routine, and, psychological comfort. That really mattered. Chicory also produces edible leaves and survives drought and compaction. For modern resilience, grow chicory as a dual-purpose crop. Harvest the leaves early, roots later, and dry them for long-term storage. This plant really demonstrates how morale and nutrition are, inseparable in survival contexts. The lesson from the Second World War is not just what plants were used, but how they were managed. Civilians planted for persistence, not, aesthetics. They tolerated messiness in exchange for calories. They saved seeds, harvested selectively, and accepted seasonal eating. To apply this today, designate a section of land where resilience matters more than appearance. Allow perennial and self-seeding plants to establish. Learn harvest timing, not just identification. Store dried roots and leaves, not just fresh produce. This honestly turns historical knowledge into practical insurance. Why forgetting these plants, makes modern survival weaker. Modern survival culture often focuses on gear, not ecology. Survivors during the war relied on plants that grew without permission. These species are still here because, frankly, they are evolutionarily stubborn. Ignoring them means ignoring the most proven survival system humanity has ever used, locally adapted food plants that require almost nothing to survive. If this kind of deep, historically grounded survival knowledge matters to you, subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who studies history seriously and keep this information alive. Forgotten knowledge only stays forgotten if we let it.